The hall was filled with soft murmurs and the scent of incense, the kind that usually brings peace, yet something about that evening made my chest tighten. I sat among the girls from the neighborhood pretending to listen to Saida's gentle melodic voice as she led the gathering. Everyone adored her, her tall frame, her graceful expressions, her calm tone. People said she had a spiritual glow that comforted hearts, but to me, her presence always carried a strange heaviness, a quiet tension I could never explain. As she spoke, my eyes wandered aimlessly until they stopped abruptly at her neck. A thin chain rested against her skin, a familiar chain. My breath hitched, my gaze locked onto it as if something inside me had been jolted awake. That necklace wasn't ordinary. I had fastened it around my sister Aram's neck the day she left for this very gathering, the same day she disappeared. Before I could hide my shock, Saida's eyes caught mine. A flicker, sharp, cold, almost predatory, passed through her expression. The softness she displayed moments earlier vanished for a heartbeat, replaced by a chilling awareness that only I seemed capable of noticing. My entire body stiffened. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I wanted to look away, pretend I hadn't seen anything, but I couldn't. My stare remained fixed on her as fear slowly crept up my spine. The room was filled with admiration for her. The girls sat smiling, whispering praises, unaware that a silent storm had begun inside me. Suddenly, thirst struck me like a wave. My throat burned, my mouth felt dry, and I didn't understand why. A servant walked in with a tray of juice glasses, offering them to everyone. I took mine absent-mindedly, my mind still battling the truth that had confronted me. Without thinking, I drank it in one go. Within seconds, the room began to tilt, my vision blurred, my heartbeat hammered loudly in my ears, and shapes around me dissolved into shadows. The realization hit me with terrifying clarity. There was something in that drink. My hands trembled as I tried to stand, but my legs refused to move. I wanted to call out to the girls, tell them something was terribly wrong, beg someone to help, but no sound escaped my lips. As the gathering ended and everyone rose to leave, my world dimmed. The last thing I saw through the haze of dizziness was Saida's face slowly curving into a malicious smile, a smile that confirmed my worst fear. Something monstrous was hidden behind her holy mask, and I knew with absolute certainty that I was next. When consciousness returned, it felt as though I had been dragged up from the bottom of a deep, suffocating ocean. My eyelids were heavy, my head throbbing with a slow, pulsing ache. For several moments, I couldn't understand where I was or how long I had been unconscious. But the first clear sensation was coldness biting through my skin, crawling into my bones. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I realized I was lying on a rough floor inside a narrow room that resembled a ruined storage cellar. The walls were cracked, patches of plaster missing. A faint line of light slipped through a tiny opening high above, the only point where daylight forced its way in. Everything else was swallowed by shadow. Then came the second realization. My wrists and ankles were tightly tied. Panic rose like a flood. I tried to move, to twist free, but the ropes dug harshly into my skin. My breath became shallow, my chest constricting as fear gathered in my throat. Memories of the gathering rushed back in fragments. The necklace on Saida's neck. The juice. The dizziness. Her smile. And suddenly, everything made sense. I had been taken. Just like Aram. The thought pierced through me like a blade. My sister had been missing for a week, and now I was trapped in the same nightmare she had walked into alone. My heart ached with guilt and regret. I had begged my mother not to send me to the gathering, but she hadn't listened. No one had. To them, Saida was a holy woman who could do no harm. They trusted her blindly. They trusted her more than they trusted my instincts. Hot tears blurred my vision as the weight of reality settled over me. I felt utterly helpless, two sisters gone without a trace. What must our parents be going through? What rumors must the world be spinning? People are quick to blame girls, quick to stain their names, quick to assume the worst, and now, with both of us missing, what kind of agony had fallen on our home? A faint rustling sound startled me. My heart jumped as a small cat crept from behind a pile of broken furniture. For a breath, I felt relief. At least the sound wasn't a human one. But the fear quickly returned, because if an animal could hide here, who else could be lurking in the shadows? The room smelled of dust, dampness, and hopelessness. It was clear that many had been trapped here before me. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a well-laid trap, and now I was caught in it with no visible way out. Sitting in that dim, suffocating room, I began piecing together every disturbing detail I had ignored. Everything pointed to one truth. None of the disappearances in our neighborhood were coincidences. Each time Saida organized her Thursday gathering, a girl vanished. And every time, people brushed it off as fate, misfortune, or worse, a scandal. But I had watched closely from the beginning. I had always sensed something unnatural in her gaze, something too calculating beneath her gentle smile. Yet no one listened. The neighborhood adored her. They praised her piety, her kindness, her pure intentions. To them, she was a woman of faith, a healer, a guide. But beneath that flawless image was a predator hiding in plain sight. The more I thought about it, the more pieces slid painfully into place. Saida never allowed married women into her gatherings. She invited only young, unmarried girls. And when one disappeared, she was the first to express grief, the first to comfort the family, the first to help with the search. Her performance was so flawless that suspicion never landed on her, not even for a moment. I remembered how people whispered that my sister Aram had probably run away. The police didn't care either. They dismissed our report as another case of a girl eloping. Their careless words had shattered my father's dignity and crushed my mother's spirit. Even my own family began doubting Aram, believing the lie because it was easier to accept than the terrifying truth. But now, tied in this cold room, I knew exactly what had happened. Aram hadn't run away. She had been taken, just like me. My chest tightened as a wave of helplessness washed over me. I imagined what my parents must be enduring with both their daughters missing. The shame, the judgment, the sleepless nights filled with fear. Society is merciless to girls. When a daughter disappears, the world does not ask what happened to her. It asks what she must have done. And now the cruelty falling on my parents would be twice as sharp. I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing, but the rising terror wouldn't let me rest. The room felt haunted by traces of the girls who came before me. Silent voices left behind in the cracks of the walls, hidden tears dried into the floor. Every broken piece of furniture, every claw mark on the wood, every faint stain seemed to tell a story of someone else who had been trapped here, waiting for help that never came. This place was not a mistake. It was a destination. A dark, deliberate doorway through which innocent girls disappeared and never returned. And now I was the next name in that silent, tragic list. Time crawled in that cold room, each second, fueled by dread and uncertainty. My mind battled between fear and fury, replaying every warning sign I had ignored. I kept wondering what had happened to Aram, whether she had sat in the same room, tied in the same position, wondering why no one believed her instincts. The guilt was suffocating. I had failed to protect her, and now I couldn't even protect myself. The rusty door suddenly screeched open, slicing through the silence. I froze. The dim light from the hallway outlined the figure of a woman entering the room, and for a moment, I didn't recognize her. The person who stepped inside bore no resemblance to the demure, veiled, soft-spoken woman admired by the entire neighborhood. This version of Saida was different, shockingly different. She wore fitted clothes instead of the loose white garments she was known for. Her hair was uncovered, cascading messily over her shoulders. Heavy makeup masked her face, and a cold, sharp smile replaced the gentle expression she showed the world. It didn't take long for me to realize that this was not a new woman. This was Saida's real face. She looked at me like someone studying a captured animal, her eyes gleaming with amusement and contempt. "You have been watching me from the beginning, haven't you?" she said, her voice stripped of the softness she used to enchant the neighborhood. "That look in your eyes. You were always suspicious." I felt my throat tighten, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. She laughed softly, as if my fear entertained her. "You shouldn't have stared at the necklace," she continued. "You recognized it. That made you dangerous." She walked closer and crouched beside me. "Do you know how many girls I planned to take before it was your turn?" "But you," she tapped my chin with a manicured finger, "you forced me to change my schedule." Her words chilled me. She didn't just want to abduct girls, she enjoyed the hunt, the power, the manipulation. With unhurried movements, she reached down and untied the cloth around my mouth. My voice was shaky when I whispered, "Did you take Aram?" She paused only for a moment and then answered with unbearable calm, "Yes." That one word shattered me. Before I could ask anything more, she stood up. "You will be moved soon. Try to behave. Screaming won't help you." And without another glance, she turned and walked out, locking the door behind her. Her footsteps faded, but the terror she left behind stayed, filling every inch of the room. The mask had fallen, and the monster beneath it had finally shown its face. And now there was no pretending. I was trapped in her world. Aram's voice felt like a lifeline thrown into a storm. The moment she screamed my name, she ran toward me, and I barely had the strength to hold her. She was trembling, thin to the point of fragility, her cheeks hollow, her eyes swollen from days, maybe weeks, of crying. But she was alive. That alone ignited a small flame inside me, something I hadn't felt since the moment I saw that cursed necklace. Around us, dozens of girls watched with silent desperation. Some were younger than Aram, some older, but all shared the same hollow expression, an expression carved by fear, longing, and hopelessness. They sat on torn mattresses, leaning against damp walls, their eyes reflecting the same question: will we ever go home? The room smelled of sweat, mold, and despair. The windows were sealed shut with metal sheets, leaving no escape route. A single dim bulb flickered overhead, as if struggling to stay alive in a place designed to kill hope. Every detail declared that the people running this operation were professionals. They had done this before. They knew exactly how to break a person without touching them. Still holding Aram, I whispered, "I'm here now. I won't let anything happen to you." She nodded weakly, but her tears told me she didn't believe such promises anymore. A few minutes later, the woman who brought food earlier entered the room again. Her hands shook slightly as she handed out metal plates, avoiding eye contact with all of us. When she reached me, I gently touched her wrist. "Please," I whispered, "tell us what they're planning to do." She hesitated. Fear tightened her face. She looked at the door, making sure no one was listening. Then in a trembling voice, she said, "You need to pray for a miracle. These people, they belong to a powerful network. They kidnap young girls and send them across borders. Virgin girls are worth the highest price." Her words stabbed the air like knives. A suffocating silence spread through the room. One girl dropped her plate, another covered her mouth to keep herself from screaming. Tears began to flow uncontrollably around us. Pain, terror, and helplessness filled the entire space. But I did not cry. I couldn't cry, not when so many eyes were searching for strength, not when Aram's small hand clutched mine like it was the only piece of safety she had left. I swallowed my fear and forced myself to speak steadily. "We're not giving up. We will survive this. Someone will come." Outwardly, I sounded confident. Inside, I was breaking, because I knew the truth. Hope was a fragile thing in a place built to destroy it. Time inside that hidden prison lost all meaning. There were no windows, no clocks, no way to distinguish morning from night. The only reminders of passing hours were the footsteps of guards and the clinking of metal plates when food was delivered. Every girl lived in a suspended state, half alive, half numb, trapped between fear and fading hope. Aram clung to me constantly. She startled at every sound and often woke up shaking, her breathing uneven. The younger girls cried in hushed sobs at night, their voices breaking the silence like tiny fractures in a wall already crumbling. Some of the older ones had stopped reacting altogether. They stared blankly ahead, their spirits crushed long before I arrived. But two girls stood out the most, sisters, both daughters of a high-ranking judge. Unlike the rest, they didn't cry or plead. They sat huddled together in a corner, holding each other's hands in silent panic. Their eyes told a different story, a story of disbelief, of girls who had grown up protected and privileged, never imagining they would one day be prisoners sold like objects. Their presence also made one thing clear: nobody was safe. Status, wealth, reputation, none of it mattered here. Every night, I lay awake praying for a miracle. I pictured my parents, broken, sleepless, tormented by rumors they couldn't silence. In their world, two missing daughters meant endless shame. People would whisper, they would judge, they would invent stories. No one cared about the truth. Girls weren't considered victims, they were blamed, suspected, and labeled without mercy. That thought tore me apart more than anything happening around me. I often caught myself staring at the metal door, imagining it opening to freedom, but it never did. Days bled into each other until they formed a shapeless fog. Even the girls' conversations became repetitive. Whispers of fear, memories of home, desperate prayers that grew weaker with each passing day. The worst part wasn't the lack of food or the darkness or the constant fear. The worst part was the uncertainty. Not knowing when we would be taken. Not knowing where we would be sent. Not knowing if we would ever see daylight again. The woman who brought food avoided us more and more. Even she seemed to sink further into guilt and fear. Once she whispered to me, "They will move you soon." Her voice shook as if she dreaded the day as much as we did. I held Aram closer that night, pretending to be strong while silently breaking inside. I kept telling her we would survive. But inside my heart, a terrifying question echoed. How much time did we have left? The night before everything changed felt no different from the countless nights we had endured. The room was silent except for the occasional sniffle or quiet rustle as a girl shifted uncomfortably on the hard floor. Aram slept beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, clutching the edge of my shirt like it was the only anchor keeping her from drowning in fear. I stroked her hair gently, trying to lull her into deeper sleep. Even in rest, her breathing trembled. When the metal door slammed open with a force that shook the walls, my body went rigid. I expected the worst, the moment we would be dragged away to a place from which none of us would return. Some girls screamed, others froze, unable to make a sound. My heart pounded so violently that for a second, I couldn't breathe. But then, through the commotion, I heard something I hadn't heard in days. Men shouting commands, boots pounding on concrete. Not the calm, calculated footsteps of captors. These were loud, urgent, chaotic. Before any of us could make sense of it, masked officers stormed into the room. Flashlights cut through the darkness and loud voices echoed through the space. "Stay where you are! You're safe now! Don't move! Safe!" The word felt unreal. Girls began sobbing, loud, uncontrollable cries that had been trapped in their throats for too long. Some reached for the officers, others collapsed in shock. I held Aram tightly as she looked around in disbelief. For a moment, fear and hope clashed inside her eyes, unsure which one to trust. As we were guided out of the room, the scale of the operation became clearer. The entire building was crawling with police and special forces. Several members of the trafficking ring were handcuffed on the floor, their faces pressed into the ground. Others had managed to escape, slipping away through hidden exits before the officers reached them. But the majority of the victims had been found. That alone felt like a miracle. Outside the building, a line of patrol cars and ambulances waited. Flashing lights illuminated the night sky, painting everything in urgent shades of red and blue. Officers moved quickly, guiding the girls out one by one, wrapping blankets around shaking shoulders, offering water, trying to calm their terror. I soon learned the truth behind the rescue. The judge, the father of the two wealthy sisters, had refused to sit still. He had pushed every authority he knew, demanded action, and insisted on a deeper investigation. His influence had forced the police to take the case seriously. With help from intelligence units, they finally traced the network to this hidden location. If it weren't for him, none of us would have been found. Poor families alone would never have been heard. As the night air hit my face, I looked up at the sky for the first time in days. We were alive. And for the first time since Aram disappeared, hope finally felt real. The ride back to the city felt unreal, as if I were floating between two worlds, the nightmare I had escaped and the life I hoped still existed. Police officers sat beside us, trying to offer words of comfort, but most of us were too overwhelmed to respond. Aram held my hand so tightly that her fingers trembled. Her eyes, swollen from days of fear, blinked rapidly as if she needed reassurance that she was truly free. When we reached the station, officials separated us into groups based on our hometowns. They kept the media at a distance, refusing to allow anyone to photograph our faces. For once, the world felt protective rather than cruel. I watched the wealthy sisters reunite with their influential father outside the station. He pulled them into his arms with a mixture of relief and heartbreak. The sight filled me with gratitude because his power had cracked open the doors of a place no one else could reach. But soon my attention shifted to a more personal fear. Would my parents be here? And if they were, in what state would they be? When the door opened and I saw them standing there, it felt like the ground beneath me dissolved. My mother rushed toward us first, her steps uneven and desperate. She cupped our faces with trembling hands, crying so hard she could barely breathe. My father reached us moments later, and for the first time in my life, I saw him break completely. He pulled both of us into his arms, his voice shaking as he whispered how he had feared the worst. Tears soaked my shoulder, tears I never thought I would witness from him. We stood there for a long time, all four of us intertwined, trying to make sense of the miracle unfolding around us. No words were enough. No explanation could undo what we had endured. But the warmth of their arms, the unconditional love, was the first true comfort I had felt since that terrible day. On the way home, they told me something that made my stomach twist. The moment I had been abducted, Saida had disappeared. She had packed her belongings overnight and fled the neighborhood without a trace. The police had searched her house and discovered multiple disguises, fake documents, and items belonging to missing girls. Yet she remained untraceable. A ghost, hiding behind masks, slipping into new identities. Thus, the realization hit me hard. Evil doesn't vanish, it relocates. As we reached home, I looked at the small rooms that once held laughter, fights, meals, and dreams. Everything felt familiar, yet painfully different. Trauma had entered with us, and nothing would ever be the same. But we were home, alive, together. And that was enough, for now. Life slowly began to move again, but not in the same way it had before. Freedom did not erase the memories of locked rooms, muffled cries, or the cold smile of the woman who stole so many girls' futures. Even in the comfort of our home, fear lingered in corners, shadows that refused to leave. Aram flinched whenever the doorbell rang. I woke up at night imagining the sound of metal locks and footsteps approaching. Recovery was not a moment. It was a long, uneven journey. Our parents tried their best to rebuild our world. They kept us close, refusing to let either of us out of sight. Neighbors visited, expressing shock and sympathy, yet beneath their kindness, I sensed something else. Curiosity, whispers, doubt. Society struggles to understand survivors. People find it easier to discuss than to support. But this time, my parents stood firm. They protected us fiercely, refusing to entertain any rumor or question that disrespected what we had endured. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the heaviness in our hearts began to ease. Aram started laughing again, though softly, as if afraid to trust joy. I tried to focus on helping her heal, even while stitching together the broken pieces inside myself. We attended counseling arranged by the police, where survivors shared their stories of captivity, fear, and unexpectedly, resilience. Each story reminded me that survival was not just luck, it was strength, endurance, and faith. In time, life carried us forward. Years passed. We grew older, found love, and eventually built families of our own. Though the wounds of our past never fully vanished, they transformed into reminders, warnings etched into memory. We learned to live with them, not in spite of them, but Saida remained a shadow in our minds. Her real name, her past, her accomplices, everything about her was crafted to vanish. Authorities searched for her, but she had dissolved into another identity, perhaps another city, another neighborhood. The thought haunted me for a long time. How many girls would cross her path next? How many families would trust her the way ours once did? Evil wears disguises, and she wore hers with terrifying perfection. And so I began to share my story, not for pity, not for attention, but as a warning. People must learn that danger often hides behind kindness, that trust must never blind judgment, and that vigilance can save lives. I tell this story so others open their eyes, so no young girl walks blindly into the hands of a predator, masked as a saint. Today, I live with gratitude, grateful for survival, for family, for second chances. But I also live with awareness, because the world is full of people like her. May every daughter be protected. May every hidden predator be exposed. And may no girl ever have to endure what we survived.